My father started at Gordon Russell's in 1926. He was one of Gordon Russell's first apprentices. He was 14 years old when he started, and he started off in the time of pure arts and craft furniture. He saw it from that time, as his time there, through what we call modernism, and that's when I came in. I started my apprenticeship in 1959. I saw from modernism to 20th century furniture and the introduction of all sorts of new machinery, like CNC machinery, which was quite a big step. I don't know if you know what CNC machinery is, but it's machinery controlled by computers. Although I just made a note, I think my official apprenticeship started when I was 6 with my father in his own workshop. I spent a lot of time in there, and we were doing mostly antique restoration work, which gives you a lot of insight into how furniture is made. So that's the start. So we can go into the next one. Yeah. Right, so this is Gordon Russell. This is a later photograph of him. My talk will start later into the 1920s, but I better give you a background to why the Russell family came to Broadway. Gordon's father, S.B. Russell, bought the Ligon Arms in 1904. He wanted to turn it was a rundown coaching inn, and he wanted to do something better with it. He saw the introduction of the railway coming into Broadway and the motor cars coming into Broadway, so he realised that there was a great possibility. So he decided to renovate the Ligon Arms and make it more modern. And in doing that, he wanted to put some better furniture in there. So he started buying antique furniture and renovating antique furniture. So the whole business started through antique furniture in a restoration shop. So that's how the whole business started. When Gordon came to Broadway, he was 12 years old. He went to Chipping Campden School, also with his brother Don. Don Russell was eventually the manager of the Ligon Arms. Some of you probably remember him. In Chipping Campden, we had the arts and craft movement run by C.R. Ashby, and Gordon became very interested in the arts and craft movement altogether. He loved local craft. He loved things like thatching, dry stone walling, carpentry, all those things. The next thing, when he left school, first of all, he took a year out sailing around the world on his uncle's ship. And then when he came back, when he was 15, he started work in his father's antique restoration business. So for a number of years, he worked in the antique restoration business. And because of that, he began to understand how furniture was made and a lot about it. He basically wasn't very over-enamored with antique furniture. He saw lots of possibilities of improving it. You'll find out later on, Gordon didn't have any training at all as a furniture designer. He was just very artistic, and he was very adept at doing drawings of furniture. The next thing that happened was the First World War broke out, and Gordon signed on for the Worcestershire Regiment, and he went off into the First World War with his brother Don. They went through all the major campaigns in the First World War. They came back. Luckily, they both came back. Gordon had been injured. He'd also been awarded a Medal for Gallantry. He'd become an officer, and he commanded a number of men. And when he came back, this was in 1919 now, he went back into the furniture restoration business, but he decided he wanted to, can we put the next slide on, please? Sorry. Yeah. This was the name of the furniture restoration business, but Gordon decided he wanted to do something more constructive. He'd seen all the death and destruction in the First World War, so he decided he would become a furniture designer and start making furniture. So with his father's help, yes, please, he set up a business making furniture. This was a bit later on. He started off in about 1922. As you can see, he started off, it was all part of the Lig and Arms, so they started making their furniture in a building at the back of the Lig and Arms, which eventually was knocked down. This is the building where they were. This is where the Edinburgh wing is now. That's where the first workshop was. As you can see, in that workshop we reckon there's about 18 people working in a very tight space, not very health and safety conscious. Gordon always believed in using machinery, which put him at odds with a lot of the arts and craft people, but he decided that there was no point in slogging away doing the hard work when a machine could do a lot of it for you. So underneath this building there was a certain amount of machinery. That's on the first floor, and there was machinery there. A number of people on there, I don't know whether this is going to work. That chap there is called Bert Holloway. I don't know if you remember him from my last talk. That chap there is called Adrian Hermson. He was eventually the works manager. And 1, 2, 3, that one there is my father when he was apprentice. So I've got records of him all the way through. The next one, please. They also, apart from that furniture workshop, Gordon designed gates, wrought iron gates, and lots of metalwork. So we had a metalwork shop which was there. It was actually still there until the factory was knocked down in 2000. It's just next to the Budgeon store, co-op store now. There were 3 forges in there, and there were quite a few people doing wrought iron work. The chap at this right-hand side was called Harry Gardner, and he was a very famous metal worker. In my time when I was there, the forges stopped working. They kept one there, and all they used to do with it was to make their toast on it for breakfast. And they were sold, and they were moved to the Avon Cross Museum, so that's where they went to in the end. Next one, yes please. No. So we start off with the early arts and crafts furniture. It's very basic. It's quite basic stuff. Gordon designed this type of furniture. It was very much influenced by the Barnsley and Jimson movement at that time. The furniture, if you look at it, we call them chamfers, but all around everywhere there are beveled edges. We call them chamfers. He was very favourable to chamfers. Chamfers, it all came really from the idea of farm machinery when they had carts and they all chamfered the corners off so they didn't, cause a problem with the machinery. And also those things there, which was, I don't know if you can see those. No, it's not showing up. Those were arches in there. We call those hay rake stretchers. And that came from the idea of the old hay rakes when you had a wooden pole and a hay rake. So the furniture in those days was very simple. It was we call it the Cotswolds style of arts and craft. It was sort of, it was simple really. It was all mortise and tenon. Everything was mortise and tenon together. I don't know if you can see it from here. It was mostly in those days made with oak or walnut. Those were the 2 main timbers we used. And I don't know if you can see it from there very well. If you look at the front of the doors, can you see all those flashes across? Those are called medullary rays. That's what you get on oak if you cut it in a certain way. And that's what they love doing, cutting the boards so that you get those medullary rays and showing up. The next one. Yep. There was also a tradition of making chairs. Lots of furniture makers, they made cabinets or they made chairs. At Gordon's factory, they always made chairs. They made chairs to go with everything. So through the years, we had different chairs. This is about 1926. It's when they dot around a bit. but it's a walnut chair, and you can see it's a simple chair, but all the joints on all our chairs were always mortise and tenon joints, and that's why they lasted so long. Today, well, even in those times, a lot of the joints were done with dowel joints, and they broke. And one of the principles of Gordon's furniture was, with a chair, you always had a stretcher rail, which was the rails at the bottom, so that it gave it the strength. If you make a chair without a stretcher rail, they always break on the back joint, where the back leg goes into the leg. If you make a frame like that, they don't break, so they last longer. Next one. So the next one is, again, a simple sideboard. It's moving on a bit. It's making a bit more interest in it. It's made with oak again. It's interesting that there are 4 doors on there and 2 drawers. And you can see that the legs sort of follow up through the centre of the doors. The handles, those little cross pieces, they were made out of what we call bog oak, and they just slip backwards and forwards. And the handles in the drawers at the top were all, Gordon's drawers were nearly always vertical handles. That's how they liked it, because they always dovetailed them up from the bottom, so they slipped them up from the bottom. And there was nearly always, a groove across the back of it to put the plates in. Thanks, Neil. Just jumping a bit farther forward, we've got this one in the museum. So if you do come into the museum, I can convince you to come. This is the Lloyd George chest. This was made for Lloyd George. He had his own forestry, and one stage he decided to send a holly tree to Broadway and said, make me a chest. So Gordon had to make a chest, because I think he was the Prime Minister, or he'd just been the Prime Minister. So Gordon made this chest, and it's always been called the Lloyd George chest. It was a lovely thing, and the interesting thing about it, if you look at it closely, were the handles, which were basically, they looked like stainless steel, but they were actually called rustless iron. They never went rusty. And the centre drawer was to keep his hat on. He always wore a top hat. I'm just going to have to sit down a bit because I've got a sore leg. That's right. The next one. Yeah. This one, again, we've got this one in our museum. We call this one the Paris cabinet. This one was made for a Paris exhibition in 1925. It won a gold award for the design and craftsmanship. It's a beautiful machine. It's a beautiful piece. It's made all in English walnut. Every single piece on it, apart from the handles and that, is walnut. Even the drawer bottoms themselves are all walnut, and they're all beautifully dovetailed. The legs, as you can see, are octagonal, and they let in a spiraled diamonds of ebony all the way down each leg. It was all right for Gordon to draw that, but to set that out and make it work properly was very difficult. So that was up to the craftsman. You imagine trying to start at the top and finish at the bottom in the right place when you're going around there. It was very difficult. Okay. I thought I'd just show you one of the drawings, because Gordon, he did a lot of drawings. In 10 years, he did nearly 1,000 drawings of furniture, glass, metalwork, and some leather work. This was typical of his drawing. Do you notice something about the drawing? Because if we got any designers or makers here, what's wrong with it? He never put any dimensions on the drawing. All the drawings were made at 3 inches to a foot scale. And if you look on the bottom, look, it says somewhere 3 inches to a foot. So when we got the drawings, it was before my time. When they got the drawings, they had to scale it off with their own scale rules and set out their own furniture. Later on, we had special people called setter-outs who did all that. But the beauty of it was that was all the information you were given. You were given that drawing of a front elevation, a side elevation, a bit of decorative work where he wanted to show all the intersections of the chamfers, and also he wanted a bit of fancy work on the legs down there. And the other interesting thing was, it's got the drawing number on 609, which takes it into the second part of the 1920s. On the bottom, it says dispatched. And the interesting thing is, these drawings were all made, drawn. They went to the factory. When it was delivered, they stamped dispatched on it and sent it back to the drawing office. So all the drawings we got, however ancient they all got stamped dispatched on the bottom, which really spoilt them. Later on, obviously, when we had more modern techniques, we didn't have to do that because we just copied the new drawing off. So that's showing all the details, and that is typical of Gordon's drawing. One interesting thing is we do host a lot of students into our museum, and they're always completely foxed. Because if you say to them, that's done to 3 inches to a foot scale, they haven't got a clue what you're talking about. They just don't know. Even modern students today, they haven't got a clue what 3 inches to a foot means. They don't even know what a foot is, I don't think. Only a football. Okay, the next one. They also, just to give you a bit of variety, they made lots of garden seats. I think possibly because they started off making them for the Ligon Arms, but they became quite fashionable to have quite nice looking garden seats. The principle of everything we did in the way of chairs and tables, they were always mortise and tenon joints. So that's why this stuff lasted so long. Lots of modern stuff falls apart, but these were all mortise and tenon joints. And usually there were wooden pegs through the joints to hold them together. So even if there wasn't any glue on there, they wouldn't fall apart. Next one now. This is an interesting one. I put it on because, again, you might like to come and see it in our museum. It disappeared, and it appeared in America somehow. We had a message from a lady who said she'd bought this thing in a yard sale, which I believe is a sort of a car boot in America, and she looked underneath and it said Gordon Russell. So she looked on the web and said Gordon Russell, and she found our thing. So she sent us a picture of it. Would we like it? So yeah, we would like it. So we bought it quite cheaply and brought it back. It was badly damaged, but I did restoration myself on the door fronts. It was somebody had broken it open and smashed it all. It was made in walnut, and it had what we call crotch walnut veneers on it. So it's a beautiful thing. If you see it all the way around, it is in our museum. I'm sure you'd love to come and see it. Next one. And this is a table, again, it's in our museum. It's 1926, and I always think it's quite a modern table for then, actually. I mean, it'd be a lovely table to have now, wouldn't it? It's a gate leg. It's got four gates on it. It's made in oak, and also it's got the hay rake stretchers on all the legs. Can you see all those on each corner? The next. Now I'm going to go, because Gordon was in the army and he worked with ordinary people. Gordon realised that arts and craft furniture was all very good, but it was all very expensive. So he wanted to make furniture which was affordable for the ordinary people. So he designed this range. We call it the Western Group. Most of our ranges of furniture were named after local villages. This was called the Western Group. It was a completely machine-made table, and it was put together with, just by hand. It was a bit like, dare I say it, IKEA or whatever you call it. And this was a modern version of that. So every component on that is machined. So he decided that's how you could make affordable furniture. And from then on, there was always this tradition of making. We always made special furniture, but we always tried to make affordable furniture all the way through, because that's the only way you could compete. And it became quite a tough market to be in those days. So next one. Just before, so basically Gordon designed all the way through the 20s. In the 20s he designed nearly 1,000 pieces of furniture, glass, metalwork. And it was getting so busy that he had to start running the company. So he stopped running the company. So he brought in these two to carry on with the design of it. Gordon was, in 1942, you'll see in a minute, he was appointed by the government to run the utility committee, which was the utility furniture, which I'll explain in a minute. He was a founder member of the Council for Industrial Design. He was awarded a CBE in 1947. He was involved in the Britain Can Make It exhibition and the Festival of Britain exhibition. And in 1959, he was knighted in the New Year's Honours List. These two chaps here, on the left is Dick Russell, that's Gordon's younger brother. In those days, you didn't have any official training for furniture designers. They were virtually all architects. You know, Barnsley, Jimson, William Morris, they were all architects. And they actually designed the buildings and they designed the stuff to go in them. So Dick was specifically sent, he was Gordon's younger brother, to train to be an architect. So he trained him to be an architect. And then he came back to Broadway in the 30s and took over responsibility for design. The chap on the right we call him Curly Russell. His name was William Russell. Everybody called him Curly. Right through the trade, he was Curly because of his hair. He was no relation at all to the Russell family. He just happened to be called Russell, and it was very interesting. He came from a very well-known furniture college called Shoreditch College. He was basically he was a trained cabinet maker, very high-skilled cabinet maker, but he adapted to actually helping design and make and drawing furniture, and he worked very closely with Dick. And eventually Curly took over most of the designing which was going on. Yes, please. So basically in this time, there was a concentration on making more furniture, affordable furniture, and the use of machinery. And there was no stop to the amount of machinery they used to help the cabinet makers or whoever to do the work. So that was, we call that a tenon machine. As I said earlier, everything we did, if it was a table, a chair, it was always tenon. That's a tenon machine, and that was taken in 1928. Actually, that machine was a Wadkin machine, and you won't believe it was still in use in Broadway, and the factory closed in 2000. That's how good that machine was. It was slightly safer later on. It had more guards on it. And then on the right, you'll see there's a turner. This chap was called Ron Pepper. He was a wood turner. And you'll notice that the drive from the lathe comes from overhead shafts. In the early days, they had overhead shafts, and it was all driven from above. Next one. Right, so, yeah, no, one at a time. Yeah, no, okay. The top one shows the cabinet shop. When they expanded the factory in the 30s, they built quite a big factory. That's the cabinet shop on the left. And believe it or not, there were 40 cabinet makers working in that. That's 40 cabinet makers. Then there was a machine shop next to it, and there were 20 or 30 machinists. So that's where they did all the production furniture, which was quite high volume furniture in those days. And on the right, we had what we call the contract shop, where we did the one-offs. So all the time we did production furniture and one-offs. That was a continual process in Gordon Russell's. I don't know if you know that chap. His name was Harold Robinson. He was a very well-known Broadway chap. He was very famous in the bowling club, if anybody plays bowls. I don't know if you remember him. Right, the next one. Now we're going on into the 30s. This is this was, I've forgotten the name of it. This was designed by Dick. This was called just a minute, sorry, my mind's gone here. Sorry, yeah. Welbeck, sorry, it's Welbeck. This is called the Welbeck Suite, designed by Dick. This was moving into more modern furniture with the assistance of machinery and this was a cabinet, a sideboard suite, a table and chairs designed in mahogany, and it had a sort of a splash of root ash in the middle of it. And underneath you'll see a carpet. The carpets were all designed and made in Broadway. They were designed in Broadway, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Carry on. Yeah. This was a desk, single pedestal desk, designed by Dick Russell. It's a funny looking thing. It was made in Macassar ebony. So the Macassar ebony, if you look at it, it come across the top and it followed all the way down the front. So it was basically a lot of hand veneering went on in that thing. What he realised in those days was people, if you had a swivel chair, they were a bit of a pain, but if you have a swivel chair and it's only got one leg, you can swivel out of it quite easily. Next one. And this was a sideboard by Curly Russell. It was in book matched walnut. It was a beautiful sideboard. It's got 4 doors. It's got it's the job to see the handles on there. They were very just slightly raised. Curly actually had a job to move away from arts and crafts, so there's still a bit of feeling of arts and craft about that, as well as modernism. Next one. Also soft furnishing, so they made lots of soft furniture, easy chairs, sofas, all the fabrics, all the curtain fabrics and the carpets were designed by a lady called Marion Pepler, who was the wife of Dick Russell. When she came to Broadway, she was actually somebody else's wife, but it changed hands slightly. But she became quite a famous carpet and fabric designer, so that's Marion Pepler. We've got all her archives in the museum, so it's a beautiful 30s, 40s designs of carpets and furniture. This one. Yeah. This was another one by Curly Russell. It was walnut and burr ash bedroom suite. So this was going into the late 30s. It was a beautiful piece of furniture. It was made. You had a dressing table, you had a sideboard, and you had the bed head and the bed foot, which were all quite normal to have the whole bedroom suite. We'll see some more later on. And this was an interesting one designed by Dick Russell. It's an interesting sideboard because it was designed for as a special for a society of what was it called? Royal Society of Architects for their headquarters. The carcass was in mahogany. The doors on the front, there were 4 doors, and they were veneered in ebony. And can you see what is inlaid in there? It's bones. we had, next to our factory in Broadway, we had Collins the butchers. so at some stage they decided to get a bit of bone and slice it and inlay it into the doors. And you can see the handles actually, the bones are poking out. When we get people around, they're quite horrified by the fact of having that bones, but it's cheaper than having ivory. Okay, next one. Now, into the 30s, we got this big factory into the 30s, and it was a big expanded factory, and there was quite a recession on. I think it was caused by the American markets. So they were seriously running out of work. So Gordon met a chap called Frank Murphy, who was a Murphy radio man, and Gordon decided he could make radio cabinets for him. So they made beautiful radio cabinets for Frank Murphy Radios. I think Murphy Radios is still a name. This was the first one designed by Gordon. It was walnut. It was called, you believe this, the Pentonville model, because they thought it looked like Pentonville prison. And on the next slide, that's right. So they did all sorts of radio cabinets. In those days, they were looked on as pieces of furniture. Your radios were looked on as pieces of furniture. They weren't just something stuck there. It was a whole piece of furniture. And the right-hand one is actually a very early television set. That's one, we've actually got that one in the museum. If you want to see a proper telly, it was a massive thing. So that was the period of Murphy radios. It took off to such an extent, they were so popular that in a recession they had to build another factory in Park Royal in London to make enough of them, and they employed lots of cabinet makers in London making radios. Yeah, what's next? Oh yeah, the next thing happened was the war, Second World War, 1939. The government decreed that nobody could make furniture anymore. All the furniture factories were put onto war work. The Gordon Russell factory was predominant thing was ammunition boxes, because the ammunition boxes had to be wood, because I suppose it didn't spark if you've got definite ammunition in there. We made aircraft recognition models, which were sent to all the anti-aircraft people and to the Royal Observer Corps, so they could recognise the aircraft that were flying over. They were all made in wood. We made the wind tunnel test models for the Spitfire. When the Spitfire was being made, the wind tunnel test models were made in the Broadway factory. I'll show you that in a minute. We made patterns for Doughtys, because Doughtys in Cheltenham, they were making the undercarriages for bombers, so they needed patterns for all their metalwork, so we made the patterns. And the other big project they had was the Mosquito aeroplane wings. There's a chap in here tonight who actually worked on Mosquito aeroplane wings. I don't know where he's gone. No, here he is, Rodney back there. Put your hand up again, Rod. So, Mosquito aeroplane, I didn't know, it was a very fast, lightweight bomber. It had 2 engines. There were 2 Merlin engines on it. They were massive engines, and it was made of wood. So each component made with different factories. So the Broadway factory was making parts of the wings. Somebody else made the fuselages, and it was all bolted together. And the amazing thing was, in early parts of furniture production, you didn't worry too much about dimensions, but when you get onto aircraft, you're talking about thousands. And this was very, very new to furniture makers, as you can imagine, talking about fine developments like that. So if you go to the next one, please. That's the wind tunnel test model for the Spitfire. It's 6 foot across, and we have got pictures of them in the wind tunnel. So they had to check how the air flowed over them. That was the first stages. It came to various stages. That's one. Next one. That's an aircraft recognition model, and I think that was a Spitfire. So they didn't shoot at the Spitfires. So the Spitfires eventually had different wings. They weren't pointed like that. And then that's an undercarriage for a bomber. That's made in wood. That is, it wasn't made in wood. It was formed in wood, so they could create their patterns. So they molded they made the molds with those and formed them. Formed the metal things in them. If you look at it, it's highly technical and it's beautifully accurately made, actually. Right. Now, because we stopped, every furniture factory was stopped making furniture. Are we doing right? I think so. Better speed up a bit. Because every factory was stopped making furniture, there became a shortage of furniture. So the government decided we better do something about that. So they decided that we would set up a committee to design furniture which could be sold, and it could only be sold to people who were just newly married or they had lost all their furniture in the bombing. So this was utility furniture. Gordon Russell was appointed as the chairman of the utility design committee, and they designed all the utility furniture. I don't know does anybody remember that sign? Yes. That shows how old you are. That used to be on all our clothes and things. The first one was CC41. That meant the idea thing. It was controlled clothing, 1941, and then it was applied to furniture, and they changed the name to controlled commodities 42. So you will see on furniture, you will see CC42, but that's what it means. And everybody were familiar with that. So if you go to the next one, Gary, thank you. So they brought out the utility furniture catalogues. This furniture was designed by the committee. It could only be made, it was the only thing that was allowed to be made. Everything was specified, the dimensions, the prices, and everything about it. And to buy it, you had to be in one of these special grades. I'll just flick quickly through the utility furniture. We've got one of those pieces in our museum, and they did last a long time because they were so well made, they didn't wear out. The only thing that probably went wrong with them, they were made a lot of plywood in them, and they got attacked by woodworms a bit. So, yeah, okay. That's a table. Carry on. And you got various dressing tables and mirrors. Yeah. And then you got, at the end of the utility period, when the war finished in 1945, the government said, oh, okay, you can make your own designs now. So they released the clamp of the utility furniture, and you were allowed to make your own designs, but it had to be within specific limits, how much material you could put into that piece and how much you could charge for it. So there's a few examples of that. We've actually got one of those there. They are mahogany carcasses. That was designed actually a bit later in 1950, in the post-utility period, designed by a chap called David Boo. It was a mahogany carcass, and it had rosewood doors, and the rosewood was veneered onto birch lambing board, and the pattern on the front isn't an inlay, it's a groove. So they routed it through so you could see the white coming through. They became very popular, and today they are very, very collectible. A few years ago you could get them for 250 quid. Today they're all over £1,000, and there's a lot of them about. So if you can pick one up for 250 quid, I should do it, really. Okay. And then this was a simple dining room suite in the post-utility period. Okay, we go on to the 1950s. I must speed up a bit. Taking longer than I thought. This was one of the most popular chairs we made. It was designed by Curly Russell in 1950. We called it the X chair because it was one of the first drawings that had an X number in front of it. So I can always remember that's the X6408, that's the X6409. And if you worked in the factory, you knew all these numbers. That chair started being made in 1950. I think Rodney there probably wore his fingers out on a few of them because they were quite dangerous things, some of them. And they were still being made and sold in 1990. That's 40 years. That shows you how popular that chair was. Very, very well designed. We'll see some more in a minute, Kane. This was an early dining suite by Curly Russell. It was made in laurel and teak lippings and legs. So you got a sideboard, a table, and you can see they were using these X chairs all the way through on all sorts of furniture. You'll see these X chairs. Next one. And again, this is a nice chair. We made loads of those. A table, sorry. It was a big expanding table, and they were very popular tables. You notice now the furniture is starting to become quite a lot bigger, because it wasn't that houses were getting bigger, it's the fact that a lot of people were buying them for boardroom tables and things like that, so they could make big ones. That table could be expanded quite largely to make a big dining room, boardroom table. And then, that's fine. And then, this stage, they realised that, I'm getting a bit, I'm in my notes. At this stage, they realised that there was a lot of work to be done in office furniture, and eventually Russells became purely office furniture makers because that's where the money was. We couldn't compete with the bigger manufacturers on domestic furniture, but this is the start of office furniture. Those were simple desks. They were mahogany desks. There was an L-shaped desk, a double pedestal desk, and a single pedestal desk, and they were sold quite extensively to offices all over the country. This is another little story on its own. We had a contract in 1955 to furnish the royal palace in Baghdad. Sorry, it was for King Faisal. he made all the furniture. This was a table. It's totally inlaid all over the top. That chap you saw earlier, called Bert Alloway, he spent nearly a year on his knees doing the inlay on that table. All the furniture was made. Unfortunately, before we delivered it, King Faisal was assassinated. So the furniture was all put into store, and eventually the Iraq government did pay for it, and it did go over there, and nobody knows what happened to it. Then I expect Saddam Hussein took it somewhere. That's just a detail. Can we just go back one, Neil? Gary? So that's a table. The next one's a detail. Showing you what it was like. So that was a rosewood top. It's got maple leaves. The stalks on it were ebony. And you won't believe it, the petal things were made actually out of ivory, which you couldn't do today. But okay. Now this was a table made for the Queen. We had the royal warrants for quite a number of years until we were taken over by Steelcase, actually. We had the royal warrants. This was a table made for the Queen when she went on a royal visit to America. She presented this to President Eisenhower. It showed the D-Day landings. So it's got, if you look at it, it's got England and it's got France and all the beaches, and it shows a diagram of all the land where the D-Day landings were. The whole thing was made. It was a walnut frame. The top was tooled leather. So all that thing on there is leather. It's leather. It's been tooled leather, and it's got a glass top on it. So that was made for the Queen to give to President Eisenhower in 1957. I think it said on there actually. Yeah. And then in the late 50s, does anybody recognise this? This is Coventry Cathedral. We had a job. We won the contract to make 2,000 chairs for Coventry Cathedral. Dick Russell designed it. It became quite an iconic chair because they were made for churches and cathedrals all over the country. Everybody wanted them because they were called Coventry chairs. The only drawback was in those days they had to be made for £4 each. This was in 1958, 59. £4 each. And I expect Rodney made a few of those as well. Okay? And then we go into the 60s. Again, I'll keep going back to sideboards because this is one of our main cabinetry things. This was a rosewood sideboard with mahogany fronts. It's got 2 doors and about 8 drawers on it. It's quite a popular little sideboard. Next, yeah. And this was a lovely bedroom suite made in, I've got to remember now, this was in laurel and mahogany. So it was a beautiful bedroom suite. It was very popular. It was designed actually in a collaboration with Gordon and basically Curley, and it was called the Kinkham Range because Kinkham was the house where Gordon lived at Chipping Campden. Most of the furniture was named after villages. Okay. Again, moving on to desks. Okay, go back one. We did desks. Again, the desks were progressing. All the office furniture was progressing. Through the ages, you will see different desks coming along. Yeah, a special table. This was made for the Royal Society in Carlton House Terrace in London. I actually worked on that table myself with a chap called Harold Robinson, so that's one of my favourite tables. The chairs, it was made with, again, it was Australian, I think it was Australian laurel, the veneer on it and the solid, and the chairs were obviously made as a production made, but the table itself was a handmade table. Okay. 1970s, a change again. Curley had retired. Dick Russell had retired. These caps came along. The first one on the left was Ray Lee. He came and took over from Dick as the design director. The chap in the middle was called Trevor Chin, and the chap on the right is called Martin Hall. Martin still lives in Broadway. He lives next to the Catholic Church school. Do you know anybody? You probably know him. He was a very good furniture maker, but also a very good designer. And you'll see some of Martin's designs as well. Okay. Obviously, trying to be competitive in the contract market. This is simple, plain ash dining room furniture designed in that period by Trevor and Martin and probably Rayleigh together. But again, they made the sideboard look and the table, and they were still using the X chairs as well. Okay. We moved into a more elaborate. Funny, it looks from here as though that's black and white. Is it? Should be coloured. Anyway, okay, it's rosewood. We made quite an extensive use of rosewood veneer. Rio rosewood veneer was an exotic material. At one stage, we were the biggest users of rosewood veneer in the country. This was a very nice dining suite. It all had wall storage units. This was called the Breeden range. And it actually it started off as a basically house dining furniture, and it actually expanded into quite big office boardroom tables and things like that. Yeah. Yeah. Another simple sideboard. Sorry, I'm going to move on. That's a rosewood sideboard designed by Trevor. And the next one. This is, again, office furniture. This was a move into office furniture. We called this Broadway 2, and this was a very popular range. It was made in teak. This was extensively sold into offices and all over the country. To be quite honest, most of the stuff we ever made went into London, actually. Next one. And then at one stage, we got a contract to furnish Hilton hotels. They were building Hilton hotels. There was one in Stratford, one in London, I think there was one in Manchester, and we got the contract to furnish them. So extensively designed by, it was designed by a combination of Dick Russell and Curley and the architects who owned the building. So we made all the furniture for Hilton hotels. Okay. Also, another range came out. This was when you go into a reception area in a big office. This is reception furniture. This was very popular. This was called Series 50 reception furniture. We made loads of that as well in different materials. Okay. And I've got to remember the date of this one, as I get it wrong. This was 1977. The Queen's Silver Jubilee, we made this gun cabinet. It was rosewood. It was inlaid with silver. All the inlay was silver. The guns were Holland and Holland guns. Holland and Holland were very famous gun makers. They are in Bond Street in London, opposite Ashbury's. Ashbury was a big shop, and we know that we got on very well with a chap called Algernon Ashbury. He came down and helped us with a lot of designs for that sort of thing. So that's a gun cabinet. And I think those guns, probably each gun was worth more than the cabinet itself, actually. Okay. And this, still with the royal warrants, I've got to remember this date as well. 1967, going back a bit. You probably don't remember, there was a massive storm and it blew all the trees over, particularly in Windsor Park. So the Queen sent this yew tree to Broadway and said, I want a cabinet. So this was made for the Queen. This was made, it was yew tree. It was a curved, it got curved glass panel in the front and in the ends. It was a lovely cabinet. The only thing I can say about it was the curved glass was on about a 3-month waiting list. So it was my responsibility. I was the manager then, and I thought, well, if something goes wrong and we break one of those pieces of glass, we'll have to wait 3 months before we can get another piece. So we ordered 2 pieces of each of the glass. So in actual fact, they made it and they didn't break any of the glass. So we had 3 bits of glass spare, but I don't know what happened to those after that. And then we're moving into, again, to trying to compete with domestic furniture. This was more like, really even more like IKEA or Habitat or something like that. This was beech and it had laminated fronts. It was very popular with the younger generation. And also the next one was the same furniture. It was actually made in Japan. We set up a production unit in Japan because they wanted European furniture, but it was too expensive to ship it over there. So we joined with a factory over there and we started making our furniture in Japan. The only condition was they couldn't sell it out of Japan, so they could only sell it to themselves. So that was the Japanese. 1980s, we go along. We call this the Marlowe Suite. This was designed by Martin Hall from Broadway. It was a lovely suite. Again, it's in Rio Rosewood, and it's not a very good picture to show it, but again, it was mainly used in big dining rooms, or it could be used in meeting rooms or boardroom tables and that sort of thing. Next one. Again, moving on to office furniture. This was called Series 1 office furniture, and this sold quite extensively into offices. The tops were mainly teak, and they had chromium legs, and it was that modern look of that period of the 70s. Okay. This was designed by Ray Lee, and we called this the Sycamore range. You won't believe what I'm going to tell you now, because this, in 1970, somebody invented MDF. Have you heard of MDF? And so it was thought, how can we use MDF? So the idea was we make these lovely cabinets in Sycamore, we make the legs and the top in solid MDF and paint it. So that's what it is. It's a Sycamore desk and it's purely MDF. It actually, people will down-cry MDF. It's a really good material for making furniture with. You probably don't realise it. You've probably got a lot of MDF furniture in your houses, but you probably don't realise it, especially in kitchens and places like that, right? And then interestingly, this is a really interesting period. If you think this is office desk accessories, and if you look, there's cigarette box, there's a cigarette lighters, there's ashtrays, and coasters, this was called the U-line range. The idea was to use up odd bits of timber so you didn't waste it. So it became so popular, we were cutting up trees to make this. Okay. And then this is when it started changing in 1986. There was a takeover by a company called Gyroflex. They came from South Wales. They had 3 factories. They bought Gordon Russell's. They bought a factory in Swindon called Plunkett's. They bought a factory in Margate and one in Tring. And they named it all Gordon Russell PLC. And they turned it into a big PLC. We were all given shares. And it worked quite well for about 4 years. So this is one of their first chairs, which I didn't particularly like it all that much, but that's why it didn't get a very good picture. It's made on a CNC, this chair. It's made on a computer-controlled machine. So basically, you glue it all together, and it goes on the machine, and it machines it all out like that. Next one. And then we made various boardroom tables and big tables. That's just showing the ends of the tables. This was called, I can't remember, it was a Genus, I think. It was a part of the thesis range, and there were all different tables made like that. This was in that period of the first takeover. And that's another one, that's another thesis table. They were they could be enormous tables for boardrooms. Okay, now, this was, again, a very modern office. At one stage, they had a competition to bring some designers in to see who could design good pieces of furniture, and this was one of the winners. It's a very modern office piece. There's, the boss could sit at that desk, or we could turn it around. It could be a meeting table, and that was very modern. This was a very modern office in the 1980s, right? Do you recognise that building? Portcullis House in London. We weren't allowed to take photographs of the furniture, but we made all the furniture that went into Portcullis House. This was made in 1989, 1990. So we made all the furniture that went in there. It was all made, but you weren't allowed to photograph it. But all those it's standing next to Big Ben, look, if you can see. And they were all offices for the members of Parliament because they ran out of offices. And there was an underground passageway went from there under to the House of the Parliament. And then 1990, along comes another company called Steelcastra 4, which was when things started really going wrong. They were a French company. The Gyroflex company were very clever. They sold to Steelcase this massive Gordon Russell PLC. And because they sold it to Steelcase, we all made quite a bit of money on our shares on that, which was quite useful. But they didn't really understand, this American company didn't really understand what we were about. So they tried to turn us into more of a car factory, really, but it was a really difficult time. That chair was called a prism chair. Okay. That's another MDF table by a chap called Ron Carter. Completely red. It was completely MDF and it was painted red. Horrible chairs, as you can see. Right. This was quite a nice range. I've got to remember what it was called. It was called Zircon. It was walnut frames and it was bird's eye maple panels on all the desks, and they were stained with a light metallic finish, and it was a beautiful range actually. We'd made quite a few of those in that period. And that's another part of the Zircon range. And then, probably getting towards the end now, this was the last big contract we did was the Arab Organizations building in Kuwait. After the war with Iraq, we went over there and we furnished this building, which was all meeting rooms, floors. It was a complete nine-story building, and we furnished the whole building. This was all in cherry veneer. That was in the early 90s. I put that on there because that's the biggest table we ever made. That was, in fact, I was involved in installing that table in that room because it was quite difficult to get it right, actually, because it was a massive table. And they all sat around, all the Arabs sat all around there, as you can see. And each module had a pop-up computer, which in those days was quite crude compared with today, you know, with these things. You can see they popped up like that. It was a great big, horrible-looking thing popped up. And the interesting thing, you see the design on the left, that's the Arab sign. You had to be very careful because it's very similar to the Israeli sign, and they were very, very important that you didn't mess that up. Everything we did had to be proved that it didn't come from Israel. So everything we bought, we had to prove it didn't have anything to do with Israel. And so this was a massive contract we did. It was the last big one we did for when we were working for Steelcase. So that's the next one. So okay, so this is just time is perfect actually. Said quarter past. So in 2000, Steelcase decided to sell the company. So they sold it to they sold the site, and they moved it to a production unit in Worcester. They made most of us redundant. And they thought they could run it with temporary labour, and they carried on for a few years, and by 2007 it became insolvent and it obviously packed up, and the name of Gordon Russell was sold to a company called Hands of High Wycombe, who are a very good cabinet making company. We are friends with them, and they do sponsor our museum, and they do carry our name, and they do make some furniture with our name on it. Next one is the archive. So at the moment, you must come to our museum. We've got a permanent archive there. Right from the start of Gordon Russell, they kept records of everything they made, right up until the time of basically Steelcase. Photographs of everything, sales records of everything. We had, when they cleared it out, we had 15,000 drawings. There are 900 drawings by Gordon Russell himself. We got 18,000 photographs. We got records of customers and contacts. We've got sales catalogues and prices. We've got 150 pieces of furniture on display or in our store in our museum. So that's the story of Gordon Russell. So that's just, you've got to come on to the sales bit now. I've lost it now. So basically, I've lost the sales bit. Anyway, hang on a minute, I've just got this book here. So, I've lost me the paper with that on. So anyway, yeah, I've got it here, sorry. First of all, have you been to see us? Have you been to see our museum? Yes. If you haven't, you must come. We'll really welcome you. We've got wonderful volunteers in there who run the shop and show visitors around the museum, and they show groups round, and they're quite knowledgeable. So if you're interested in arts and craft, or you're interested in a nice little job on the side, you won't get paid for it, but it's a lovely job to do. Or perhaps you'd like to become a friend. So we've got a friend scheme. We've really got a good offer on now. If you become a friend, it's £15, and you get a free book, which is this one, which was actually £13, so it only cost you £2. You also get, for a year, you get free entry into the museum, and you get to come to our talks. We do a fair amount of talks. We've done visits to other places, and we have an annual garden party. That's the end of my story. Oh, before. I've got here, if you're interested, a membership form, so if you'd like to take one and become a member. I've also got a volunteers form if you'd like to become a volunteer. You just come up to the desk after. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Martin, thank you very much. And I think you can tell by the reaction that was a very successful talk. It's a wonderful piece of Broadway's history and a wonderful piece of English design history. So thank you very much. I think we have time for a question or two. So if anyone would like, I'll bring the microphone round.
They're all stunned.
Malcolm.
Oh, stand up for a minute.
In that wonderful talk, you only mentioned yourself twice. First as apprentice, and then later on as manager. And I wondered what you did in between. What was your specialism?
Yeah. Well, I was trained as a cabinet maker. I spent the really nice years making nice furniture in a special shop, which was a lovely job actually. It was a question of it was so nice making furniture. You look forward to going to work. It was really good. And you think about it when you go home. You think about it. Yeah, what are you going to do tomorrow? So that's how friendly it was. And then later on, I became what they call was a setter out. So we had to take the production drawings and turn them into patterns for the machine shops. Then I became a foreman in the assembly shop. And then I became a production manager for a period. And then eventually I was made redundant by Steelcase. That's my history. It was a really good company to work for. I didn't mention that most of the time we had 150 to 200 people working in there. That was in Broadway. It was a big employer in Broadway, as you can imagine. And they came from all over the place. They were Broadway, Evesham, Cheltenham, Stratford, all over the place. Lots from Chipping Camden. Yeah. Thank you.
Any more? I've got one if nobody else has. You were talking about records.
Yes.
But I think it's right that some of the records don't exist because of a fire. Am I right?
No, that's correct.
I asked because I've got a library extension built in, I think, in the 1920s, my grandparents.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Which you've seen.
Yeah.
And he says it's genuine. That's what I was told by my father as well. That's what it came from. And so I think we can probably believe it, but we haven't got a record.
No, what happened is in 1940, when they bombed Coventry, the aircraft were going over Broadway and they were bombing Coventry. And when they were coming back, they were being chased by our night fighters, and they dropped their bombs anywhere to get rid of them, and unfortunately they dropped bombs on our factory, which was the big tithe barn, which was where now the co-op store is. That was a big tithe barn, and that's where all our records were. So a lot of them were destroyed in that fire. We've managed to bring. Still collect a lot of them. We do get records back from customers and inquiries and that, so we store them. My colleague here, Neil, we spent since the last 10 years documenting everything for records. So we've got something like 6,000 items we've documented now, and then we're now photographing them all, scanning them all. Sorry.
Well, I think again another big thank you, and also I'd endorse what you've been told about the museum. If you haven't been there, it's well worth going around. It really is. Christopher's been involved with some of the talks, I think. Yeah.
Christopher's one of our tour guides.
Yeah.
Big one. So we do tours. We do obviously ones and twos, but we like groups if we can get them coming. We have groups coming from all over the place, arts and craft people. We had a group from America this year and last year doing the arts and craft tours, and yeah, that's what we're about anyway.
Right. So, if you haven't signed the sheets, would you do so? And then off you go, and we'll clear. If you could pile the chairs into groups of perhaps 4 or 5, 5 or 6 perhaps, and then we'll see you all in September.